You are listening to continuing coverage of the trial of Chad Daybell from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast. Let's go back to the courtroom.
This is Detective Stubbs.
Hello.
Meet you.
So, we're here.
Oh, this is a big mess. I just talked to the guy on the.
And what did he ask you?
He was just saying that he wanted to do a well check on JJ.
So, JJ would be where?
He's in Arizona.
Who's he with in Arizona?
He's with one of my friends in Arizona.
Oh.
Hi.
Oh, you got a notepad?
No? Want me to get one?
No. Come here. You mind if he comes in?
Oh,
So,
Thank you.
all right.
who's the friend he's with?
My friend Melanie. Her son has autism.
Oh,
Stuff that was going on. If you want to know, it's a lot of stuff. So
Well, that's why we're concerned, because it just was kind of weird.
it is very weird. I've had to move around a lot. One of my brothers is trying to kill me. Not the brother that lives here, obviously. He's kind of my protector. But everyone is causing me trouble right now. So
We don't want to cause a lot of trouble. How long have you been here?
we've only been here since September.
Okay.
We moved up here in September. My daughter to go BYUI.
We had two detectives over here trying to,
Looking for you a
Oh,
little while ago.
because I was at the store.
and they ran into, well, probably one of your brothers in
My
the back
brother
here.
and his friend, probably.
Oh,
We've
who's
been
that?
moving. Chad.
Chad from around here?
Mhm.
What's his last name? Yeah.
On that same day, Chad called Melanie Gibb and he told her, the police are going to call. Don't answer. Melanie talked about how Chad sounded scared. She asked Chad, JJ's not with Kay? Chad's response, no. Chad knew JJ wasn't with Kay. Later, Lori did reach out to Melanie and she asked Melanie to lie to the police and say JJ was with her, that she'd taken him to the movie Frozen. She even went so far as to ask Melanie to snap a photo of some kids to try to pass it off as JJ. You heard from Melanie Gibb. She trusted Chad. She trusted Lori. They had told her law enforcement was dark. She initially told police JJ had been with her. Pretty quickly after, she corrected her statement with law enforcement and told them she never had JJ. He'd never been with her. She didn't know where he was. On December 8th of 2019, Melanie Gibb decided to place a phone call to Chad and Lori.
Okay. I did have a question that I asked Al at one point, your brother, if I wanted to know, like where he was, and he said I did not want to know and that he could not be found. So what does that mean?
I don't know why he would say that, but it's the same story. Like I don't even want Al to know. I don't want anybody to know, so that nobody has to be worried about it. I mean, nobody has to be questioned about it, so he can be safe.
Chad knew JJ wasn't with Kay. Alex said Melanie didn't want to know where he was.
Is JJ safe?
He is safe and happy.
Okay, well,
Remember how JJ was found? He was found discarded in Chad Daybell's backyard. Lori said he's safe and he's happy. Chad Daybell is standing there with Lori when she makes those statements. No chime in from Chad. But Chad knew Kay didn't have him.
So is there kids that are not involved, or what are they talking about? So I'll have a clue if they show up at my house.
If they show up, you can just give them the attorney's name and say, we're not talking to you without an attorney.
Okay.
Because
No.
they're,
Well,
it's my sister-in-law. It's just a bunch of people that are starting trouble for no reason.
okay.
You just heard an excerpt of Chad talking to Jason Williams. But before that, on that December 8th call with Melanie Gibb, Chad ends up chiming in and he's trying to explain the Tammy situation. People are out to get us. People are making stuff up, such as my sister-in-law. Tammy died naturally. Tammy died in her sleep. Tammy was having health issues. Her heart was about to give out. My kids will testify to that.
So is there kids that are not involved, or what are they talking about? So I'll have a clue if they show up at my house.
If they show up, you can just give them the attorney's name and say, we're not talking to you without an attorney.
Okay.
Because
No.
they're,
Well,
it's my sister-in-law. It's just a bunch of people that are starting trouble for no reason.
It's separate from the Tammy situation.
Again, Chad trying to distance and explain the Tammy situation separate from the kids. But it wasn't separate. Chad determines if people are dark or possessed. Chad rates their death percentage. And we all know what Chad said. Dark people, possessed people, the body has to die. JJ, Tylee, Tammy, all labeled as dark by Chad Daybell.
It's a simple situation, but we just can't tell you because then you'd have to be involved.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I get it. That's fine. So at that point, they're talking about bringing down like a host of like FBI people involved and stuff. And I'm like, I don't want, you know, I don't need that. It's Christmas. So, you know, that's where I'm just going, all right, that's interesting. So, okay.
Well, you don't know anything, which is great. You don't know anything.
No, I don't know anything. And so that's good news at that point in time. So, okay.
I don't know how they would have done that other than Heather.
You heard from both Melanie Gibb and Jason Gwilliam. They recorded these calls. They were both hoping to help locate JJ and Tylee. They still hadn't been located. You also heard some recorded calls that were recorded by Ian Pulowski. In those calls, you hear Chad and Lori repeatedly refer to law enforcement as dark. Some of them are even disciples of Cain. They're so dark. Melanie Pulowski at one point asks what she's supposed to do about Detective Hermosillo because he's not going to stop. He's not going to stop until he finds those kids, and she wants advice from Chad. What does she do? Chad's response, get out of his way. He doesn't say, and Lori doesn't say, we'll produce the children, we'll come and help you. Chad actually tells her, well, they are going to continue to bug you because you're the only one they can locate right now. She's the only one they knew where she was. Back in October, Lori had messaged Chad about Alex. She had some concerns. She ends up telling Chad he would be the one they used to get us both. Who is they? Law enforcement. You heard Melanie Gibb's statement in that recording. Alex said, I don't want to know where JJ is. You know who labels people dark. You know what has to happen to the body. And Alex believed Chad 100%. In November of 2019, Chad gave Alex a patriarchal blessing.
And you progressed and were selected by the Savior himself to be part of the fourth creation. Great warriors were needed in that creation. Powerful goddesses were needed to be protected, and you were selected to help protect your sister, and you helped her in numerous probations as a defender. You have a special bond even from the premortal world. You connected there, and as she grew in power, you were right there beside her. Always.
Alex was Lori's protector.
I am Chad Daybell. It is November 24th, 2019, a Sunday afternoon, 5:15 p.m. We are going to give Alex Lamar Cox a patriarchal blessing.
Alexander Lamar.
Mm-hmm. Alexander Lamar Cox, on this special day, I lay my hands upon your head to give you a patriarchal blessing as part of the member of the Church of the Firstborn that you have earned the privilege to be a member of.
Alex is a member of the Church of the Firstborn. You heard testimony about Lori and Chad's mission. Their mission, part of it, to gather the 144,000. Chad was a self-appointed leader or gatherer and the leader of the Church of the Firstborn.
You have already assisted us in ways that can never be repaid, but you will continue to do so as you move forward in this.
Alex had already done things for them that could never be repaid.
I just want you to know that at this time, the Savior is saying unto me, well done. Thy soul is cleansed, all is well. And now you'll begin into your terrestrial phase of this existence, that you'll be a powerful servant. I bless you with that knowledge that you will now move forward as a true warrior in ways that can be demonstrated through not only physical action, but through spiritual power that is coming to you and that will be bestowed upon you.
Alex had been cleaned. Whatever acts he'd done, he'd been absolved of them now, according to Chad. On December 11th of 2019, Tammy Daybell's body was exhumed. Chad and Lori had a conversation with Alex that day. And Zulema talked to Alex after that. She said Alex seemed worried when he got off the phone. She questioned him. Alex ended up telling her he was worried he was going to be their fall guy. When pushed further, Alex said, I am either a man of God or I am not. Alex believed Chad 100%. Melanie Gibb had asked Lori at one point if she believed what Chad told her. Lori had responded that she did, but that if he was a Satan, he sure was a good one. On December 12th of 2019, on December 12th of 2019, Alex Cox ended up dying the day after Tammy's body was exhumed. An autopsy was conducted on Tammy's body, and you heard from both Dr. Eric Christensen and Dr. Lily Marsden. They both unequivocally testified the manner of death was a homicide, the cause asphyxiation. And you heard them talk about the different manners of death, and you heard Dr. Christensen just yesterday talk about no sign the asphyxiation was a suicide, no sign the asphyxiation was natural, no sign the asphyxiation was accidental. That left homicide. Death by the hands of another. They talked about the bruises on Tammy. They talked about the fact those could be consistent with being restrained. They talked about the exhaustive toxicology tests that were done to try to ensure they had the correct cause of death. They talked about considering all the other natural possibilities, seizures, cardiac arrhythmia, and they talked about how they went through that process to reach their final conclusion. They talked about they followed their normal protocol. They gathered evidence, they gathered information, and you heard Dr. Christensen talk about that. Normally, you give a medical history. With his patients, they can't. They have to rely on collateral sources and collateral information. They gather the medical records, and they gather reports and statements surrounding that person's death, so they ensure they reach the correct conclusion. Again, both of them were consistent in their findings, homicide by asphyxiation. You further heard from multiple of Tammy's coworkers and friends that she didn't have any known health issues. Tammy was very active by all accounts. She participated in fitness classes. She participated in clogging. She never missed work. She was reliable and a hard worker. The only reported health concerns to law enforcement came from Chad Daybell. You heard several officers talk about that. Agents, investigators. Chad's kids didn't want to talk to law enforcement. They didn't want to provide information. The information came from Chad. Chad told people different things regarding Tammy's death. Heather Daybell, Jason William, the coroner. Tammy was sick, coughing, found her at 6 a.m. dead. Also to Heather Daybell, no autopsy because the coroner had found matter in her throat. There was no testimony of that. She died of an embolism, also told to Heather Daybell. Chad said Tammy woke up at midnight, throwing up, and died at 2 a.m. Consistent that it's an embolism, different time of death to Alice Gilbert. Tammy was sick, coughing, went to bed around 10. Chad went at 1 and found her cold and dead on the floor. To Hannah Munoz. Again, remember, Hannah went through the funeral line or the viewing line twice, once with each parent. Second time, Chad said she'd been coughing violently. Both went to bed at 10. He woke up at midnight and her body fell out of bed. While Tammy's autopsy was being conducted, while the kids were still missing, while Alex passed away, Chad and Lori remained in Hawaii, on the island of Kauai, living out the plan as set forth by Chad Daybell. They had money, power, sex, and no obstacles, and specifically no earthly relatives, no encumbrances. However, they left a wake of destruction and tears for those that had trusted them. Chad and Lori consistently told those around them it was all a misunderstanding. To Jason Williams, it's a simple situation. The kids were safe and it would all be cleared up in time. However, neither Chad or Lori ever came forward to provide any information on the whereabouts of the kids. On June 9th and 10th of 2020, you heard multiple officers, investigators, detectives talk to you about the search of Chad Daybell's property. Agent Daniels described in detail how the search was conducted, and you heard multiple officers talk about the scene, the smell, the process, and the callousness of the way the children were discarded. You heard how the officers present at Tylee's scene were on their hands and knees, sifting through the dirt with their hands, small tools in an attempt to locate Tylee's bones and her other remains. Tylee had been discarded in a pet cemetery with some of her remains in the fire pit as well. The investigators collected the bones, tissue, organs, and what has been described as a burnt mass. That's what was left behind of this young lady. Tylee had a whole life ahead of herself. You heard how JJ was buried by the pond, and you heard how once the soil was removed, there were rocks. Once the rocks were removed, there were boards. And once those boards were removed, you heard how they found JJ. JJ was 7 years old. We'd heard multiple testimony, multiple talk of Lori asking Chad about a plan, of Lori asking Chad for confirmation of the plan. And one of those things that we heard was a call that took place on June 8th of 2020. I think in the slide it was dated as 2019. That call took place on June 8th of 2020, the day before Tylee and JJ were found. Lori wanted confirmation of the plan. The judge is going to give you jury instructions, and we talked clear back in jury selection about those jury instructions. But I just want to remind you, when we're talking about a conspiracy is an agreement between two or more persons to commit a crime. Only one of those persons has to commit one overt act. So one act in furtherance of the conspiracy. And you're going to be given jury instructions, and they'll have the overt acts listed out. And looking at the overt acts, endorse and espoused religious belief for the purpose of encouraging and or justifying murder. You heard testimony from multiple witnesses, Lieutenant Hermosillo, Melanie Gibb, Zulema Pastenis, Ian Pulowski, David Warwick, Alice and Todd Gilbert. There were Temple records, iCloud records, Verizon records. You heard from Detective Considus and forensic accountant Mike Douglas, as well as Mark Sari with the Social Security Administration, that Lori changed Tylee's money to go to her on August 16th of 2019. You heard that Lori, Tylee, JJ, and Alex moved from Chandler to Rexburg. You heard about that through multiple investigators, multiple witnesses. You heard how Chad Daybell Googled south-southwest wind and visited a website. Detective Stubbs talked about that. Analyst Heidemann talked about that. You heard from Agent Balance and Agent Wright, as well as Patrick Eller, how Alex went to apartment 175 in those early morning hours of September 9th. You heard, again, from Detective Considus, forensic accountant Douglas, Mark Sari, and Agent Hart, that Lori did not report to the Social Security Administration. She continued to collect that money. There's evidence of that in the iCloud accounts and bank records. Similarly, same type of evidence to support she continued to wrongfully collect those Social Security benefits. On or about September 23rd, Alex took possession of JJ. Lori tells Warwick and Gibb JJ's with Alex, refuses to let David Warwick see him on the 23rd, and the night before, David and Melanie had seen him with Alex. We heard multiple clips from that November 26th interview with Lori Vallow, where she provided false information. JJ wasn't with Gibb. She was married to Chad. She didn't provide truthful information. September 23rd to February 1st, again, similar to Tylee in the Social Security, Lori failed to report that. You heard about that through those financial timelines that were presented and that testimony. September 9th, similarly, she continued to wrongfully collect that money. She didn't report it. She continued to collect it. Again, the Chad and Lori espoused religious beliefs in an attempt to justify their actions. You heard multiple witnesses talk about that. On September 1st, again, we've already talked about that. Multiple witnesses, multiple evidence showing they moved to Idaho. And again, remember, those text messages designating Tylee, JJ, and Tammy as dark happened before that move. Text messages with Chad and Lori regarding death percentages, we just discussed those today. You heard about them through Agent Hart, through those iCloud records. Chad Daybell obtained a burner phone. We heard about him obtaining multiple phones, multiple phone numbers. We talked about Alex Cox obtaining a burner phone on October 9th. Text messages between Chad, Lori, and Lori about Tammy being possessed. Again, we talked about those today. They came in through Investigator Edwards and Agent Hart. September 8th, Chad signed that application to increase Tammy's life insurance. His signature's on that policy. Emma Daybell talked to you about that. Alex Cox attempted to shoot Tammy on October 9th. Talked about that. You heard from multiple witnesses about the firearm, about what was reported. Deputy Cannon, Detective Kaikamanu, Investigator Edwards, Agent Wright, Agent Balance. Alex Cox conducted multiple internet searches. So we talked about that, the Homer J. Maximus account, the searches about how to shoot the AR in the cold, and different things regarding a Grendel 6.5, as well as shooting through a Dodge Dakota. Alex being at the gun ranges. We talked about that again today. Detective Kaikamanu, Investigator Edwards, Agent Wright. I'll talk to you about that. Alex traveling to Sportsman's Warehouse on October 9th. Agent Balance, Agent Wright, Investigator Edwards, Detective Kaikamanu. I'll talk to you about that location data and the recovery of the items purchased. Or the identification of the items purchased, I should say. Alex being at the church parking lot approximately 2.5 miles from the Daybell residence on October 18th, 2019. You heard about that information from Agent Balance, Agent Wright, Detective Kaikamanu, and Investigator Edwards. One other instruction that's going to be talked about and the court already has is principle to commit first-degree murder. When we're talking about principle, it can include aiding and abetting, so advising or assisting, encouraging, commanding, coercing another. Chad didn't ever have to actually physically cause the death of another person if you believe the state has met our burden with one of those other elements. If Chad advised or assisted, encouraged, commanded, coerced, and if it was premeditated, so planned or intended. Tammy Daybell was a 49-year-old mother of 5, a new grandmother. Chad labeled her as dark or possessed. Her death percentage was low. We know what happens to the body. Tammy had to die. Tylee Ryan, a 16-year-old young lady with her life ahead of her. Labeled as dark or possessed by Chad Daybell. Death percentage low. We know what has to happen. Tylee has to die. JJ Vallow, a 7-year-old little boy with most of his childhood and his whole life ahead of him. Labeled as dark or possessed by Chad Daybell. Death percentage low. JJ has to die. All 3 victims gone too soon.
There's more to come in the trial of Chad Daybell. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of our continuing coverage right here from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.